I wasn't supposed to leave work early that day. It was one of those ordinary Tuesdays, the kind that gets swallowed in the blur of routine. But around 4:30, my manager popped into my office and told me the systems were going down for maintenance. "Take the evening off," he said with a grin. "Enjoy the air outside your spreadsheets." So I packed up my laptop, slung my coat over my shoulder, and decided I'd surprise my wife with dinner. Elise had mentioned last weekend how long it had been since we had a night just for us. I figured I'd pick up some of that mushroom risotto from that Italian place she loved. Maybe even grab a bottle of red. I thought it might bring a smile back to her face, the kind she used to give me just for walking in the door. I parked on 6th Street, just a block away from the cafe. The neighborhood was dipped in the golden haze of evening light, storefronts glowing softly, couples walking hand in hand. It felt like the perfect night to fall in love again. That's when I saw her. She was sitting by the window of Café Dart, the little French-style place she used to frequent with her sister. I paused, unsure if I should go in. She hadn't mentioned meeting anyone tonight. I figured maybe she'd stopped in for a quick coffee while running errands. But then, I noticed her posture. She was leaning forward, her elbows resting on the table, her hands dancing through the air as she spoke animatedly. The candle between her and the man sitting across from her flickered softly, casting a warm glow over her features. God, she looked radiant, happier than I'd seen her in months. And then she kissed him. Not a quick, casual kiss like greeting a friend. No, this was tender, lingering. Her hand cupped his cheek. His fingers curled around hers. They stayed there, caught in that moment, like lovers suspended in time. Intimate. Natural. Like this wasn't their first kiss, or their last. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, staring through the glass like a ghost staring at the life it used to have. Everything in me wanted to believe I was mistaken. Maybe it was just a friend. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But I knew that mouth. I knew how her lips curled when she kissed someone she truly wanted. And I hadn't been kissed like that in years. I should have marched in there. I should have demanded an explanation. Thrown the wine glass. Something. But I didn't. I turned before she could see me. My hands were trembling. I walked away, each step feeling like it might be the one that made my knees buckle. I made it back to my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to the world. My mind was a storm. Scenes of our wedding, her laugh echoing in the kitchen, the night she cried in my arms after her miscarriage, the months of silence after, the nights when she turned away from me in bed, whispering, "I'm just tired," the mornings when her eyes were distant, her smile mechanical. And now I knew why. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The betrayal hadn't even fully sunk in yet. It just sat there, thick and heavy in my chest like wet cement. Instead, I drove home. Slow. Quiet. I passed the liquor store on the way but didn't stop. I wasn't ready to numb it yet. I needed to feel the full weight of it, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't a one-time thing. You don't look at someone the way she looked at that man over coffee unless you've given them parts of yourself you used to save for only one person. Me. The house felt too quiet when I stepped in. The familiar scent of vanilla and lavender still clung to the air. Our dog, Max, wagged his tail half-heartedly from the couch, but didn't get up. Even he seemed to sense something was off. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. Took out a beer. Sat down at the dining table and stared at my phone. No messages from her. No text saying she was running late. No, guess who I just ran into? To try and soften the blow of her guilt. She didn't know I had seen her. And maybe that was the worst part of all. She would come home and pretend like everything was normal. Like our marriage hadn't just been kicked in the chest. And I would let her. At least tonight. Because I needed to figure out what came next. I heard the door open an hour later. Her heels clicked against the hardwood. The rustle of her coat. The soft hum she always had when she was in a good mood. She peeked into the kitchen and smiled. The same smile that now felt like a knife being twisted in slow motion. "Hey, babe," she said, placing her purse on the counter. I grabbed some groceries. Thought we could make pasta tonight. Pasta. My stomach turned. I forced a smile, nodding. "Sounds good." She kissed me on the cheek. Cool, quick, forgettable. Then she started unpacking bags like it was just another Tuesday night. But it wasn't. Not for me. Because I had stood outside a cafe tonight and watched my wife kiss a man I'd never met before. I'd seen her happiness bloom for someone who wasn't me. And there was no coming back from that. Not really. She hummed as she stirred the sauce. I watched from the kitchen table, my beer warm in my hand, untouched. The scene was perfect, mundane in all the right ways. A wife cooking dinner. A husband coming home early. Familiar comfort humming through the walls. But the comfort was hollow now, eaten from the inside like a tree rotting in its core. "You're quiet tonight," she said without turning around. "Long day," I murmured. That was the first lie. She smiled, still facing the stove. "Well, at least it's pasta night. That always cheers you up." Cheer me up. As if food could patch the tear I felt stretching inside me, quiet and unstoppable. I nodded and took a sip of the lukewarm beer just to keep my hands busy. My mind kept flashing to the flicker of candlelight reflecting in her eyes. Eyes that looked at another man with a kind of softness I hadn't seen in years. She plated the food, rigatoni with red wine sauce, garlic bread, her usual drizzle of olive oil and shaved Parmesan, and set it on the table with practiced elegance. We sat facing each other in the silence. She lit the small candle between us, like it was date night. The same kind of candle that sat between her and him earlier that evening. "You know," she said, twirling her fork, "we should plan a weekend away soon. Just the two of us." Another lie. Or maybe a test. I wondered if she was already planning another secret rendezvous. Did she ask him to pretend to be out of town? Was this her attempt to throw me off? I nodded again, chewing slowly, even though the food had the texture of cardboard in my mouth. "Sure. How about the cabin? Our cabin, tucked up in the Berkshires. Quiet, secluded. Where we used to sneak away when the world felt too loud. Where we made love for the first time without fear of interruption. Where we swore we'd always be honest with each other." "Sounds good," I replied. I hadn't even looked up. My eyes stayed fixed on the plate, as if reading the answers to all my questions in the curves of the pasta. The same three words kept repeating in my head. She kissed him. How long had it been going on? A month? A year? Longer? Or was tonight just the first visible crack in a wall I'd been too naive to notice had crumbled long ago? I had loved her for 13 years. Trusted her in ways I never trusted anyone. Let her into parts of me that I had hidden even from myself. And now, I couldn't even bring myself to ask her how her day was. Because I already knew. The moment that kiss happened, our marriage split clean down the center. And now I was sitting at the dinner table with a stranger pretending to be my wife. "You want wine?" she asked. Her voice was bright, too bright. I looked up finally, my eyes meeting hers for the first time since she walked through the door. "No, I'm good." That flicker of disappointment crossed her face, quick as a shutter click. I'd seen it before, usually when she wanted intimacy and I was too tired. Back then, it crushed me to see that look. Now, it barely touched the surface. She kept talking about work, about how Susan from HR was driving her crazy, about how Fiona's dog chewed up someone's heels in the office. I nodded, offered a half smile or a grunt when necessary. I let her build the illusion that everything was okay. But my mind kept drifting to the way his hand had cupped hers across the table. The way she leaned in like a flower turning toward the sun. The way I didn't exist in that moment, even though I had given her everything I had. And she never even looked toward the window, never noticed me. Later, she kissed me goodnight. Just a press of her lips against mine. Not even a second long. Then she rolled over, pulling the sheets with her. I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each breath. Her breathing deepened. She slept easy. I didn't. At 2:14 a.m., I got out of bed, walked into the hallway, sat on the stairs in the dark with Max at my feet. He rested his head on my knee, his eyes full of silent empathy. He was the only one in the house who felt honest. That's when I cried for the first time. Quietly. No gasping. No sobs. Just tears leaking down my face like my body was trying to drain the betrayal out, one drop at a time. The next morning, I left for work early. Too early. Before she could ask why I didn't sleep. Before she could offer me coffee with a smile that might have broken me. I grabbed a banana and muttered something about needing to prep for a meeting. Another lie. I didn't have any meetings scheduled until noon. But I preferred the silence of my office. Preferred even the whir of the ancient copier to sitting across from her again. She texted me around 11. "Thinking of you. Can't wait for the weekend. Love you." I stared at the message, reading it again and again like it might suddenly reveal something. A mistake. A clue. A confession. Something. But there was nothing except the cruel perfection of her acting. I didn't respond. Instead, I threw myself into work. Meetings, reports, emails, anything. I stayed until 8 p.m. that night, and the next night, and the one after that. Each evening, she greeted me with dinner, with updates about her day, with soft hands and warmer eyes. Like nothing had changed, but everything had. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more. I needed to understand what I was fighting against. Was it just a kiss? Was it emotional? Was it physical? Was it love? I needed proof. So I started paying attention, really paying attention. When her phone buzzed, I noticed how she tilted it away from my view. When she said she was staying late at work, I noted the time she walked through the door. When she laughed at a text, I watched her expression. Was it him? I didn't know how long I could do this. The performance, the pretending, the waiting. But I knew one thing for certain. The woman sleeping in my bed wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone else now, and I was already grieving the ghost of who she used to be. The office had always been a place of order, safe, sterile, and predictable. Beige walls, quiet hums of computers, the occasional click of heels in the hallway or muffled laughter from the break room. It was where I came to solve problems, not escape them. But lately, it became my refuge. My sanctuary from the polite lies at home, from the soft kisses that meant nothing, from the woman I no longer recognized lying beside me each night like a stranger wrapped in familiar skin. I started staying late, not dramatically, just long enough that Elise wouldn't question it. The numbers back me up. Q4 reports, the client proposal due next week, the regional sales summit creeping up. Just enough workload to excuse the change. She never pried. In fact, she seemed relieved. Maybe it made things easier for her too. The first week of late nights was quiet. Solitary. I stayed in my glass-walled corner office, the city lights spilling in after sunset. I'd work until the cleaning crew buzzed through with their vacuums and bleach-scented buckets. I ate takeout at my desk, stared at spreadsheets that blurred together, and tried not to think about candlelight or kisses I wasn't a part of. Then came Sophie. Sweet, quiet Sophie from marketing, mid-20s, fresh from grad school, all soft eyes and polite smiles. She passed by my office one night as I reheated leftovers in the break room. Still here? She asked gently. Yeah, I said, trying to get ahead of next week. She nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Me too. Jenkins keeps piling on these brand briefs, and I can't seem to breathe during normal hours. I smiled. Welcome to the club. She smiled back, and something in her gaze lingered just a second too long. 2 nights later, Rachel joined the late crew. Rachel was everything Sophie wasn't. Bold, unapologetic, and flirtatious in a way that walked a fine line between professional and dangerous. Long legs, dark lipstick, confidence like a weapon. She never asked why I was staying late. She just dropped a bag of Thai food on my desk one night and said, "You looked hungry." I hadn't even realized I was. She winked. Don't say I never did anything nice. So it began, the strange, quiet evolution of my evenings. What used to be solitary became trio. Sophie, Rachel, and me. The 3 late ones. We'd eat dinner at the conference table, go over their pitches, share dumb office gossip. Sophie would ask about my favorite books. Rachel would tease me for my old-school taste in music. Sometimes they'd both gang up on me just for the fun of it. It wasn't flirtation at first. Not really. It was something gentler. A warmth I hadn't felt in months. The sound of female laughter that didn't carry the weight of deception. The soft, unspoken understanding that we were all there for different reasons, but each of us was, in some way, hiding from something. Still, I couldn't ignore how my eyes started to notice more. The way Rachel's blouse always opened just one button too low. The way Sophie twirled her pen when she was nervous, biting the corner of her lip. The way both of them leaned in when they laughed, their perfume catching the edge of my breath, subtle and disarming. Late one Friday, Rachel came into my office barefoot, heels dangling from her hand. "You know you don't have to keep punishing yourself here," she said, flopping onto the guest chair. "Who says I'm punishing myself?" She raised an eyebrow. "Your tie's crooked, your hair's a mess, and I swear you've worn that shirt twice this week." I chuckled. "You keeping tabs?" She smirked. "I keep tabs on everyone worth watching." A silence followed. One of those loaded pauses where words aren't needed. She didn't look away. Neither did I. Just then, Sophie appeared in the doorway, a folder clutched to her chest. "Oh," she said, stopping when she saw us. Rachel didn't move. "Come in, Soph. We're just talking about how your boss is falling apart." Sophie laughed awkwardly, stepping in. He doesn't look that bad. Rachel leaned forward and whispered, "That's because you have a crush." Sophie flushed crimson. "I do not." Rachel grinned like a cat with a trapped mouse. "Liar." I held up my hands, defusing the tension. All right. Let's get through this brand brief before someone ends up fired for HR violations." We all laughed, but there was a current now. Something had shifted. The walk to the parking garage that night was quieter than usual. Sophie walked beside me while Rachel trailed a few steps back, scrolling her phone. Sophie looked up at me once as we reached the elevator. "You're different these days," she said softly. I met her gaze. "Different how?" "Sad," she replied, not unkindly. I swallowed, caught off guard by her honesty. "That obvious?" She nodded. "Only when you're not pretending." We stood there in silence until the elevator dinged. Rachel got in first. "Coming, lovebirds." Sophie smiled at the floor. I followed them in, my chest tight. For the first time since that night outside the cafe, I felt something stir beneath the numbness. A strange, quiet ache that wasn't pain, but possibility. Something was happening. I just didn't know what yet. It was well past 9 p.m., and the office was dead quiet, save for the low hum of the heating system kicking on and off. The windows had turned into mirrors reflecting the hollow corridors behind me. I had lost track of time again, buried in a mess of marketing projections and half-eaten pad thai. The coffee machine in the break room wheezed and sputtered as I poured myself the third cup of the evening. I stared into the dark swirl of liquid, wondering how many more nights I'd spend in this place avoiding the woman I used to love. Then I heard the door swing open. "Smells like desperation and caffeine in here." Rachel's voice teased behind me, playful and low. I turned, a smirk pulling at my face despite the heaviness in my chest. If I drink enough, I stop remembering I hate spreadsheets. Rachel sauntered toward the counter, heels clicking softly against the tile. Tonight, her blouse was unbuttoned just enough to draw attention without being obvious. Her lipstick had faded from the day, but her eyes were as sharp and unapologetic as ever. "Still here?" she asked, grabbing a cup and pouring herself a black coffee without waiting for permission. "I could say the same for you." "I like the silence," she said, sipping. "The city gets loud, even when it's quiet." She leaned back against the counter, facing me now, her fingers curling around the mug like it was a prop in a scene she was scripting in real time. I nodded, unsure what to say. The silence between us wasn't awkward. If anything, it was thick. Weighted, like a rope being pulled slowly between two boats, taut and trembling. Footsteps sounded behind us a second later, softer, slower. "Sophie." She stepped into the room wearing an oversized cardigan, her hair pulled into a loose bun. Her presence always changed the air. With Rachel, it was sparks and smoke. With Sophie, it was warmth, like walking into a house where someone had just baked something sweet. "Oh," Sophie said, a little breathless. "I thought everyone had gone home." Rachel smiled lazily. "We're all just addicted to bad coffee and poor boundaries." Sophie laughed, then bit her lip. She always did that when she was nervous. I was finishing up the brand notes Jenkins wanted. "You're a perfectionist," I said. She looked up, cheeks coloring. "I just don't like leaving things half done." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "I know a few things I wouldn't mind leaving half done." Sophie's eyes widened, and she giggled in that way people do when they don't know whether to be offended or flattered. I leaned back against the counter, sipping my coffee, watching the two of them volley subtle jabs and glances. It was like I wasn't even part of the triangle they were weaving, but I was. Deeply. Somehow, I had become the quiet center of their orbit. Then Rachel turned to me, tilting her head. "Are you free after work?" she asked, her voice soft now, almost conspiratorial. Sophie looked up sharply, surprised. Her mouth parted like she wanted to say something, but stopped herself. The question hung in the air like perfume. "I suppose that depends," I said carefully. Rachel stepped closer, and I could smell her, spicy and expensive. "On what?" "On whether you both are." I didn't know why I said it. Maybe it was the late hour. The caffeine. The weeks of quiet misery clawing at the back of my throat. Or maybe it was the simple fact that for once, I wanted control back. I wanted to feel like someone wanted me, like I had a choice in something, anything. Rachel's smirk deepened. Well. Sophie looked from her to me, then back again. Her face was flushed now, not just her cheeks, but down her neck, disappearing beneath her blouse. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. I could be. She said it like a confession, like it scared her to even consider what the night might become. Rachel set her mug down and stepped back. Then it's settled, she said. Drinks after work tomorrow. No excuses. She glanced at me once more before strutting out of the break room, hips swaying like she knew I'd watch. And I did. Sophie lingered. Was she serious? She asked softly. I met her eyes. Do you want her to be? Sophie looked away. I don't know. I moved closer, just enough to make the air between us shift. And what about you? She looked up at me, and there it was, uncertainty, longing, fear, and desire all tangled together. I don't want to be a rebound, she said. I reached past her and refilled my mug. My hand brushed hers. Her breath caught. You're not, I said. You're something else. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. But when she finally left the break room, her eyes met mine for a second too long, and my pulse hadn't slowed in minutes. I stayed there alone for a while after. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. It hummed now, alive, like something just beneath the surface had started to shift. A lock undone, a line crossed, a door cracked open, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to close it again. The next night, I left work later than usual, not out of necessity, but nerves. I'd spent most of the day distracted, replaying that moment by the coffee machine over and over. The words, the glances, the spark that hung in the air like static. I wasn't sure if I'd made a mistake or if I'd finally stepped into the truth of where my life had been heading. Rachel's text had been simple. 7:30, Felix Bar, corner booth. We're something sinful. Sophie's had come 2 hours later. Hey, I'm nervous, but I'll be there. Don't make me regret it. I stood outside Felix's for a minute before going in. The place was warm, low-lit, the hum of jazz humming softly beneath the din of laughter and clinking glasses. Booths were tucked in the corners, private and dark. It was the kind of place people went to forget who they were outside its doors. I spotted Rachel first, already sipping something amber and neat, leg crossed over the other, a vision in black. She wore a low-cut blouse that hugged her curves unapologetically and a look that said I knew you'd come. Look who found his way to temptation, she purred as I slid into the booth. Would have been rude not to show up after your dress code instructions. She smirked. You're lucky I didn't ask for more. Sophie arrived 10 minutes later. She paused when she saw us, her eyes soft, a little shy, but glowing. She wore a deep blue sweater dress that clung in all the right places, her curls a little looser than usual, her lips lightly glossed. Hey, she said, almost breathless. Hey, I echoed, sliding aside so she could sit next to me. Rachel raised her glass. To poor decisions and better company. We clinked glasses. Sophie's fingers brushed mine. It wasn't accidental. The drinks came steadily, easy and warm. Conversation flowed in waves. Work complaints, childhood stories, first crushes. Rachel had a way of teasing Sophie that made her blush and bite her lip. And Sophie kept stealing glances at me, the kind that lingered. At one point, Rachel leaned across the table and said, Tell me something you've never told anyone. Sophie blinked. What? Like a secret? Rachel nodded. Something you buried. Something real. Sophie hesitated. Then, softly, when I was 16, I snuck out of my house and got caught skinny dipping with my best friend's older brother. He was 18. It was stupid and sweet, and nothing happened. But sometimes, I still think about the way he looked at me in the moonlight. Rachel grinned. There it is. The real Sophie. Sophie blushed furiously, eyes dropping to her drink. Your turn. Rachel leaned in, eyes locked with mine. I once slept with my married college professor. He told me I had a dangerous smile. I told him he had a lonely wife. Sophie coughed on her wine. I just stared, unsure whether I was turned on or disturbed. Then Rachel turned to me. Your turn, boss man. I sipped my drink slowly. I saw my wife kiss another man. Through a cafe window. The table fell silent. Sophie's hand reached under the table and found mine, fingers curling gently. Rachel's smile faded. Jesus. When? Sophie whispered. 2 weeks ago. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Sophie squeezed my hand. Rachel's expression softened just slightly, her sharp edges folding inward. You didn't tell her you saw? Rachel asked. I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted to, but I didn't want to scream or beg. I just wanted to feel something real again. Rachel nodded slowly. And do you? I looked at Sophie's hand in mine, then at Rachel's dark eyes, full of hunger and knowing. Yes, I said. Right now I do. Sophie leaned into me just slightly. Her shoulder brushed mine. Rachel tilted her head, watching the shift, the alignment, the magnetic pull building between us. Should we order another round? Sophie asked, voice a little unsteady. Rachel grinned. Why bother? She slid out of the booth, standing slowly. I have vodka at my place, and a bottle of red I've been saving. Sophie hesitated. I don't know. Rachel raised a brow. We're not going to eat each other alive, sophomore, unless someone begs for it. Sophie let out a breathy laugh, half nervous, half intrigued. She looked at me, seeking something in my eyes. Permission, reassurance, safety. I nodded once. Rachel tossed a few bills on the table, then turned, sauntering toward the door like she owned the night. Sophie and I followed her out into the cool air. The walk to her place was only a few blocks, but the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was electric. Each step buzzed with unspoken things. The kind of silence that isn't absence, but anticipation. Rachel unlocked the door and led us into a sleek, modern apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and heat. She kicked off her heels, walked barefoot to the kitchen, and uncorked the wine like she'd done it 100 times. Sophie stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. I stepped beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body. Still nervous? I asked. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Yes. I reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. So am I. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Then Rachel's voice floated from the kitchen. Are we drinking first, or diving straight into disaster? I looked at Sophie. She looked at me. Neither of us answered. But we didn't say no. Rachel poured the wine like it was foreplay, slow, deliberate, sensual. Her fingers wrapped around the neck of the bottle like she was coaxing it open, not pouring a drink. She handed me a glass without a word, then Sophie, and finally poured her own. She didn't raise it for a toast. She simply sipped, eyes locked on mine, and let silence speak louder than anything else. Sophie lingered near the window, cradling her wine like it might shield her from whatever came next. I moved to sit on the edge of the couch, watching them both, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something I hadn't planned, but had absolutely chosen. Rachel moved first. She stepped closer to Sophie, standing just a few inches too close. You always dress like you're trying not to get noticed, she murmured, reaching out to tug gently at the sleeve of Sophie's sweater. But you've got this quiet, trembling kind of beauty. Do you know that? Sophie blushed furiously, but didn't move away. You're drunk, she whispered. Not yet, Rachel said. But I'd like to be. Her fingers trailed down Sophie's arm. Light, teasing, electric. Sophie's lips parted. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment. She didn't stop her. I should have said something. I should have interrupted. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because watching them, Rachel, bold and daring, and Sophie, hesitant but drawn in, was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a trap. It was real, unfolding naturally and impossibly right in front of me. Rachel leaned in and kissed her. Soft at first, just lips brushing lips. Sophie froze. Then, slowly, she returned it. Tentative, unsure, but there. Their mouths moved together like they were both surprised by how easily it fit. I felt it in my chest, a tight pull, like a thread inside me winding tighter and tighter. Rachel broke the kiss, her voice thick. You're shaking. I don't know what I'm doing, Sophie breathed. You're doing fine, Rachel said. Then she turned, looked at me. And you? Still just watching? I stood. The air shifted. Rachel stepped toward me, brushing her hand down my chest, stopping at my belt. You're allowed to want something, you know. You don't have to keep punishing yourself. I looked past her at Sophie. She was watching, eyes wide, glass forgotten on the windowsill. Are you okay? I asked her. She nodded. Are you? I didn't answer. I just reached for her hand and pulled her toward me. She came easily, falling against my chest like she belonged there. My fingers found her waist, traced the soft curve of her back. She smelled like lavender and warmth, and when I bent down and kissed her, it was like exhaling for the first time in weeks. Her lips were soft, searching, not aggressive, not hungry, just honest. Rachel stood beside us, close enough that I could feel her breath on my neck. You two are sweet, she murmured. It's almost innocent. Then she pressed herself against my back, her hand sliding around my waist, her lips brushing the shell of my ear. But let's not pretend it's only sweet. Her fingers found the button of my slacks. Sophie pulled back slightly, her eyes flicking between us. Nervous again, but she didn't step away. "We don't have to do this," I said quietly, voice hoarse. Sophie nodded, but said, "I don't want to leave." Rachel's hand slipped lower. And just like that, the line between emotional and physical snapped. Clothes loosened, fingers explored, breath quickened. There wasn't a single moment when someone said, "Let's go further." It just happened, each gesture feeding into the next like falling dominoes. Rachel kissed down my neck, teeth grazing skin. Sophie's hands trembled against my chest, unsure but eager. I pulled her close, burying my face in the crook of her neck. She whimpered softly, and that sound, so vulnerable, so real, undid something inside me. The three of us moved together like we were improvising a dance. Touch became the language we spoke. Words didn't matter. Time didn't exist. There were moments when I thought I'd stop, pull away, draw a line. But every time Sophie looked up at me with those wide, searching eyes, and Rachel pressed harder against me with her unapologetic hunger, I gave in. Again and again. It wasn't love. It wasn't revenge. It was need. Raw, human need. The need to be seen, to be touched, to feel like something mattered. We didn't make it to a bedroom. It happened there, on the couch, tangled limbs and flushed skin, breathless gasps and desperate hands. Sophie kissed me like she was afraid I'd disappear. Rachel touched me like she knew exactly how broken I was and didn't care. It wasn't pornographic. It wasn't graceful. It was awkward in moments, too fast, too slow, bodies unsure of how to move together. But it was real, messy, tangled in emotion. Afterward, we didn't speak. Rachel curled against the armrest, legs draped over mine. Sophie rested her head on my shoulder, breathing slow and steady. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passed. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The world didn't pause for what we'd done, but I did. I lay there, tangled with two women, and thought about how far I'd fallen from the man I used to be. The man who believed in loyalty, in quiet routines, in candlelit dinners, and faith in love. But that man died outside a cafe window, and I didn't mourn him anymore. We all agreed, almost jokingly, that it should look like a team bonding night. That's how we justified it at the office when Rachel brought it up midweek, leaning across the conference table with her usual confidence. "We've been grinding," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "We deserve a break. Drinks, music, maybe a little trouble." Sophie smiled quietly, barely meeting my eyes. Rachel winked at me, her way of reminding me what we'd done and how little she cared who suspected. We picked a rooftop wine bar downtown. Chic, candlelit, and packed with the Friday night crowd. Sophie arrived first, dressed in a burgundy wrap dress that clung like it had been made for her. Modest, but flattering. Her hair was down, soft curls framing her face. She looked like autumn in human form, warm, deep, and easy to get lost in. Rachel came 20 minutes later, wrapped in a curve-hugging black number with a thigh slit that dared anyone not to look. Men turned their heads when she walked in. Women whispered. She soaked in the attention like sunlight. Drinks came quickly. Sophie ordered wine. Rachel went for bourbon. I stuck to scotch, knowing I needed something stronger than comfort. We toasted nothing in particular. At first, it was casual. Small talk, laughter, flirting that hovered just under HR's radar. But as the evening darkened and the lights over the city began to glow, things shifted. Rachel moved closer. Her leg pressed against mine under the table. Her hand brushed my thigh once, deliberate. She whispered stories into my ear, ones designed to fluster, to remind me of skin on skin and breathless gasps on her couch. But it was Sophie who pulled me in. She didn't touch. She didn't tease. She just listened. When I mentioned my favorite author, she leaned in, eyes wide, and said, "You read Baldwin?" I didn't think anyone our age still did. When I laughed at one of Rachel's more ridiculous jokes, Sophie didn't compete. She smiled, genuine, soft, like she enjoyed seeing me laugh. There was no game with her. No strategy, just presence. At one point, Rachel got up to flirt with a waiter, because of course she did. Sophie and I were left alone with the city shimmering behind her. "You seem lighter," she said softly. "Do I?" She nodded. "You laugh more now. You look less haunted." I let out a breath. I'm not sure that's true. It is, she said, then looked down at her hands. You don't talk about her. Elise? I asked, surprised. She nodded. Your wife. That word still hit like a slap, but it didn't cut the same way anymore. What's there to say? I murmured. You loved her once, Sophie said, almost like a question. I did. With everything. And now? I looked at her. Really looked. And for a moment, the background noise faded. The bar, the lights, even Rachel, all dimmed. Now I don't know who she is, I said. And I don't know who I was with her. Sophie nodded slowly, like she understood in a way I didn't expect her to. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Not possessive, not seductive, just there, present. Rachel returned a few minutes later with shots and chaos. The rest of the night blurred into noise and music. We danced. Sophie moved carefully, awkward at first, but graceful when she forgot anyone was watching. Rachel danced like a siren, wild, magnetic, commanding attention. When we stumbled into the street near midnight, Sophie shivered in the fall air. I shrugged off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at me, surprised, then smiled, small and private. Rachel hailed a cab and slid in first. You coming? She asked. Her legs were crossed, lips curled into a dare. I looked at Sophie. She hugged the jacket around herself and said, I'm walking. I'll go with her, I said, surprising myself. Rachel didn't argue. She just smirked. Suit yourself. The cab pulled away, and I turned to Sophie. She didn't say anything. We walked in silence for a block before she spoke. You didn't have to choose. I wasn't choosing, I said. She stopped walking and turned to me. But you did. I searched her face. Is that okay? She smiled softly. Yeah, it is. We kept walking. When we reached her place, she paused at the door, the keys trembling just slightly in her hand. I'm not inviting you in, she said. I know. I want to, she whispered. But I need to know this isn't just another escape. I stepped closer, brushed a loose curl behind her ear. It's not. She looked at me like she wanted to believe me. Like she was afraid to. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I said. She leaned in and kissed me, not like the night on Rachel's couch. Not driven by heat or thrill. This kiss was different. Slower. Intentional. It tasted like red wine and vulnerability. When we pulled apart, she smiled. Good night. Good night, Sophie. She stepped inside, closed the door softly behind her, and I stood there on her stoop for a long time. Not because I wanted more, but because, for the first time in what felt like years, I finally wanted something real again. The affair didn't look like a fire. It looked like routine. It looked like coffee at 7 a.m., tie half knotted, emails blinking on my screen. It looked like team meetings where Sophie sat quietly 3 chairs down, stealing glances when no one was watching. It looked like Rachel's leg brushing mine under the conference table, then pulling away before it lingered too long. This wasn't chaos. This was control. But it was the kind of control that frays the longer you hold it. By day, I was a man focused on the quarterly numbers, checking in on campaign deliverables, offering calm, level-headed leadership. I smiled in meetings. I cracked dry jokes. I brought donuts to the break room on Fridays. But after hours, something else came alive. Sophie would text me softly at night. Still thinking about that kiss. I wore your jacket again today. Can I see you soon? And I'd reply, even if I was next to Elise on the couch, pretending to watch TV. Rachel was bolder. Dreamt about your hands again. Bet Sophie thinks she's winning. Cute. My place. Tonight. No strings. No talk. It was impossible to separate what I wanted from what I needed. Rachel gave me a fire that burned so bright I couldn't see the consequences. Sophie gave me calm, but it wasn't boring. It was warm. It was steady. It reminded me of everything I thought I'd lost with Elise before the cafe window shattered that illusion. And yet, both were secrets. It didn't take long before the office whispers started. First, it was harmless. Just looks in the hallway. Raised eyebrows. One of the interns giggling as Rachel walked past me and brushed my shoulder with a little too much familiarity. Then came the speculation. I caught 2 middle managers cutting their conversation short when I stepped into the elevator. One said, he's not exactly subtle, before they realized I was standing right behind them. Sophie noticed. Of course she did. People are talking, she said softly one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper in the empty copy room. I know, I replied. What do you want me to say if someone asks? I hesitated. Nothing. Say nothing. She looked hurt. I'm not a secret. I know you're not, I said. But this isn't simple. Sophie nodded. It is for me. That night, Rachel showed up at my apartment building. No warning. Just a text. Outside. Let me in. Elise was in the shower. I met Rachel in the lobby, heartbeat pounding like a drum in my ears. She leaned in, pressed her lips to my neck, and whispered, I missed you. You can't be here, I said, gripping her arms. Her eyes narrowed. You think she doesn't know? She doesn't. Rachel stepped back, arms folded. You're playing both sides. Don't get shocked when the whole thing comes down on you. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the marble. Every sound echoed in my chest like a warning bell. That night, I lay awake beside Elise. She turned over once in her sleep and murmured my name. Not like a lover, like someone lost in a dream. I stared at the ceiling. The truth was catching up, and I wasn't ready. By the next week, Sophie began to pull back. Not completely, but enough for me to notice. She stopped texting first. She stopped lingering by my office door. She was polite, but something was different. I cornered her in the break room one night. Are you okay? I asked. She shrugged. It's just, I don't like sharing. I moved closer. You're not. Don't lie to me, she said, her voice breaking. Rachel told me everything. I stepped back. What did she say? That you still sleep with her. That you leave her place and come to mine. That you're using us both to fix something broken in you. I didn't answer, because part of it was true. Sophie's eyes shimmered. I thought maybe I was the one you were choosing. I'm trying, I said. I'm just not there yet. You're already there, she whispered. You just don't want to admit it. She walked out. Rachel texted me later that night. You always come back. I don't mind sharing. She'll learn. But I didn't respond. Because that night, I didn't want sex. I wanted softness. I wanted Sophie. But I'd pushed her too far. The next few days passed like I was watching my life through glass. At home, Elise smiled like everything was normal. She didn't ask why I was so quiet. She didn't ask about work. She just drifted beside me like a ghost in a house full of pictures neither of us had taken in years. At work, Sophie kept her distance. Rachel flirted openly again, like she was daring Sophie to retaliate. I found myself sitting in my car in the parking garage more often, just staring at the dashboard, unsure which direction to go. I wanted out. I wanted in. I wanted something clean, something real. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't keep living in two realities. Because eventually, one would devour the other. And when the dust settled, someone would be left behind. Maybe it would be Rachel. Maybe it would be Sophie. Or maybe it would be me. It started with a question. Simple. Casual. But it cracked the surface like a fault line. So who is she? I froze halfway through unbuttoning my shirt, the weight of Elise's voice more arresting than the words themselves. She stood in the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me with unsettling calm. What are you talking about? I asked, still facing the closet. Her tone didn't rise. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. I'm not stupid, she said. You've been leaving early, coming home late. You've stopped touching me. And when you do look at me, it's like you're trying to remember something that isn't there anymore. I turned, shirt in hand, chest tight. So you're just now noticing? Her eyes narrowed. So you admit it. I hesitated. I should have lied. Should have deflected. But I didn't. Yeah, I said, low and even. There's someone else. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was surgical. Elise didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just nodded like she was confirming something she already knew but needed to hear out loud. She sat on the edge of the bed like she suddenly didn't know what to do with her legs. Is it serious? She asked. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or say something cruel. But all I could do was stare at her and feel the weight of years pressing against the walls. Does it matter? I said. She looked at me, finally. Really looked. I guess not. I sat down across from her, elbows on my knees, hands clasped like I was praying to a god I stopped believing in. Then I said the thing I'd buried for weeks. I saw you. Her brows furrowed. What? That night, I said. The one I came home with Thai food and said traffic was bad? I saw you. She said nothing. You were in the café on 6th, candlelit table, wearing the green top you only pull out when you're trying to look effortless. You were glowing, Elise. Still, she said nothing. I stood outside, watched you lean across the table. Kiss him. Soft. Tender. Like the way you used to kiss me when we were still in love. Her shoulders curled inward, but she didn't try to deny it. I wanted to believe it was innocent, I continued. That maybe I'd caught a moment between two old friends, or someone who misread you. But you kissed him first. Elise's eyes welled, but no tears fell. It was one time. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Don't shrink it. Don't insult both of us. Her lips trembled. You were already gone. You left long before I kissed him. Maybe, I said, but I never left you for another person. I left because you weren't there anymore. She looked up, eyes hollow. So this is my fault. No, I said. It's ours. But you lit the match. Elise stood and walked to the window. The silence between us grew heavy, like old furniture no one wanted to move. After a long moment, she said, was she worth it? I don't know yet. She turned. There's more than one, isn't there? I blinked. What makes you say that? Because you don't sound heartbroken. You sound free. I didn't answer. Because she was right. I hadn't told her about Rachel. About Sophie. About the wine bar, or the way Sophie's lips felt against mine. I hadn't told her about nights on strange couches, clothes falling off in the dark, and the hollow comfort of someone else's warmth. But I also hadn't told her about the look in Sophie's eyes when she said, I want to be more than this. I hadn't told her how I'd started feeling alive again, even if it was selfish, even if it was wrong. Elise sat back on the bed and finally let a tear fall. Just one. Do you still love me? She asked. I didn't answer quickly. I thought about how it used to be. Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. Dancing in the kitchen while waiting for takeout. Her head on my chest when we watched bad TV. The way we used to laugh about nothing. The way we used to hold each other like the world might end. Then I thought about now. The cold silences. The absence between her fingers when she held my hand. The way we passed each other in the hallway like co-workers, not lovers. The betrayal, hers, then mine. I don't know, I said. And that, somehow, hurt her more than a no. She nodded, wiping her face. I'll pack a bag. Stay with my sister for a few days. You don't have to do that. I do, she said. We both need space to figure out what comes next. She stood and walked to the dresser, pulling clothes with slow, practiced hands. I watched her. I watched the woman I used to dream about pack the pieces of her life into a duffel bag, and I didn't stop her. Because something between us had already left. That night, the house was quiet. No footsteps upstairs. No bathroom light flicking on. No warmth beside me in bed. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I felt something close to relief. Not happiness. Not yet. But the first breath of honesty in a long time. The silence in the house after Elise left was loud. Not peaceful. Not empty. Just loud. There were no slamming doors, no apologies screamed into pillows, no accusations echoing down the hallway. Just the quiet ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the fridge, and the ache of knowing the marriage had collapsed long before either of us admitted it. For the first time in years, I wasn't living with a stranger I used to love. I was living with myself. And that was somehow worse. Sophie didn't text me for 2 days. Rachel, of course, did. So, she finally knows. How's the freedom hangover? I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because the one person I wanted to talk to wasn't the one who kept knocking. That Friday, I saw Sophie at the office. She was dressed simply. White blouse, black skirt, hair tied back. Professional. Polished. Distant. She didn't look at me once during the morning stand-up. Didn't linger after the meeting. Just handed off her report, nodded politely, and walked away. I followed her to the break room. You're avoiding me. She opened the fridge. I'm not. I'm just busy. You don't have to do that. Do what? Pretend like what happened between us didn't mean anything. She turned, finally meeting my eyes. I'm not pretending it didn't mean something. I'm protecting myself from someone who doesn't know what he wants. I do know. Then why are you still tangled up with her? She asked, voice steady but low. Rachel told me you stayed the night again. I didn't, I said. Not since the last time. But you could have, she whispered. And that's the problem. She moved past me. I grabbed her wrist gently. Not tight. Just enough to stop her. Come with me tonight, I said. Just you. She looked at me for a long time. Searching. Doubting. Then why? Because I think I'm ready to stop running from the answer. I met Rachel later that afternoon in the parking garage. She was leaning against her car, arms folded, sunglasses on despite the fading light. You're here to end it. she said, before I could speak. I am. Rachel sighed and pulled off her glasses. Her eyes were unreadable. You don't have to pretend, she said. I knew it wouldn't last. You're not the type who survives in the dark for long. It wasn't about survival, I said. You made me feel alive again. She laughed, dry, bitter. That's what I do, isn't it? I bring dying things back to life. It wasn't just sex, I said. You know that. She looked away. It was escape. And it was fun. And I don't regret a damn second of it. But you're not mine. You never were. I stepped closer. Rachel. She held up a hand. Just don't ruin the memory by trying to soften the goodbye. I nodded. And for once, she didn't kiss me. She just got into her car, started the engine, and drove away without another word. I met Sophie at her apartment that night. She opened the door slowly, eyes cautious. You came, she said. I nodded. You were the only one I wanted to. She let me in. The space smelled like fresh linen and lavender again. Clean. Warm. Her. We didn't sit on the couch. We didn't pour wine. We just stood there, near the kitchen, the tension between us stretching thin. I ended things with Rachel, I said. Sophie looked down. Okay. And Elise knows. She's gone. I don't know what's going to happen with the divorce, or the house, or anything. But she's gone. Sophie leaned back against the counter, arms crossed over her chest. And now you want me. I always wanted you. You wanted both, she corrected. I did, I admitted. Because I didn't know who I was without either of them. She didn't speak. I stepped closer. But I know now. She met my eyes. Say it then. I exhaled. Rachel was adrenaline. Your clarity. With her, it was about forgetting. With you, it's about remembering who I was before all this. Before the cafe window. Before the silence in my marriage. Before I started surviving instead of living. Sophie's eyes shimmered. I continued. I don't want thrill anymore. I want something that lasts when the fire goes out. I want you. Her voice was barely audible. How do I know this isn't just the next phase of your escape? I moved to her, slowly, deliberately. I placed my hand on her waist, not to claim her, but to connect. Because I'm not asking for sex, I said. I'm asking for another chance to earn your trust. She looked at me for a long moment, breath shallow. Then she leaned into me, not to kiss, but to rest her forehead against mine. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then let me prove it. Sophie pulled back, eyes full of fear and hope all at once. And then, finally, she kissed me. Not with hunger, but with hope. We didn't undress each other that night. We didn't fall into bed. We sat on her couch, drinking tea, legs barely touching, hands intertwined. She rested her head on my shoulder as the city lights blinked beyond her window. And for the first time since the cafe window cracked my life open, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Rumors have a half-life. They start loud, feed on shock, then starve in silence. The first week after everything came to light, the office was a minefield of half-stares and coffee-scented whispers. I felt eyes on me in the hallway. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when I entered a room. Rachel was suddenly working remotely indefinitely, and Sophie, though she never confirmed anything to anyone, had become the new topic of speculative gossip. But time passed. Whispers dulled. Curiosity turned to boredom. And people moved on. It was strange, really. The same place where everything had cracked. The same glass office where I once buried myself in spreadsheets and sterile light to avoid going home, became, slowly, a space of comfort again. Except now, I wasn't hiding. Sophie and I didn't flaunt anything. We didn't touch at work. We didn't linger too long in the break room or make excuses for late-night meetings. We just existed quietly, together, carefully. She never asked for more than I could give, but I found myself wanting to give more. On Wednesdays, I'd bring her coffee from the bakery 3 blocks over, the one that did those ridiculous vanilla sea salt lattes she secretly loved but pretended were too sweet. She'd roll her eyes, smile like she couldn't help it, and sip them anyway. On Friday evenings, we started staying late again, but not like before. No flirtation, no tension, just us, winding down the week, typing lazily while lo-fi beats played through her Bluetooth speaker. Sometimes, we wouldn't talk at all, and those were the moments that meant the most. Peace wasn't a grand gesture. It was a rhythm. Elise and I filed the paperwork quietly. No lawyers at war, no bitter battles over assets. We met at a diner, signed our names, and split the check like we were old friends who no longer had the energy to fight. She looked better, honestly. More color in her cheeks. Less of the sad stiffness in her shoulders. I asked if she was seeing him again, the man from the cafe. She smiled, almost embarrassed. No, that was a mistake. I nodded. We made a lot of those. Yeah, she said. But I don't regret all of them. Neither do I. And that was it. We hugged. Not tightly, not sadly. Just long enough to mean, you mattered once. You still do. But we're not that anymore. It was on a Sunday afternoon, months later, that I realized something had shifted. Sophie and I were sitting on my apartment balcony, legs tangled under a shared blanket, her head resting on my chest while a record spun in the background. There were no urgent kisses, no confessions, just her breath syncing with mine. She whispered, "You're quiet today." I smiled. "I'm content." She tilted her head to look at me. "Not happy." "Happy," I said. "But content is rarer." She considered that. "It is." I brushed my fingers through her hair. "You still scared?" She nodded against me. "Yeah, but less." "Me too." And we left it at that. At the office, people eventually stopped pairing my name with drama. New gossip took over. A senior manager's affair with the head of HR, someone caught vaping in the server room, a suspicious number of sick days after company happy hours. No one talked about the glass office anymore. But I still remembered it. I remembered the nights I stared out those windows, watching traffic move like blood through the city's veins while my life bled in silence. I remembered Rachel's smirk reflected in the pain as she whispered dangerous things into my ear. I remembered Sophie's voice, steady and warm, as she sat across from me, offering connection instead of escape. And most of all, I remembered the man who used to live there, the one whose life ended quietly outside a cafe window. He was gone now, and in his place was someone new. Someone who didn't need fire to feel alive. Someone who'd learned that healing isn't loud. It's found in quiet dinners, in holding hands without words, in being chosen, and choosing in return. Months later, Sophie and I found ourselves walking past that same cafe on a lazy Sunday morning. She didn't know it, not at first. I stopped in front of the window. She turned. "What is it?" "This is where I saw her," I said. She followed my gaze. "Elise." I nodded. "Right there. That table." She kissed him, and everything inside me cracked. Sophie slipped her hand into mine. "Why did you bring me here?" "Because I don't want that to be the last memory I carry of this place." She looked up at me, understanding dawning slowly. And then she stood on her toes and kissed me. Gently, right there on the sidewalk, in the same reflection where my past once shattered. "I want this to be your new memory," she whispered. I smiled. And for the first time, the cafe window didn't feel like a wound. It felt like closure, like the last page in a book I'd finally finished reading.